The Galactic Mockery. The Galactic Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Its fleets were unrivaled, its warships towering and mighty. Across countless systems, it instilled fear into every race and civilization. It was a force that believed in its absolute dominance, a belief that was about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. One day, a strange signal came from Earth. The humans, who had once been mocked by the rest of the galaxy for their primitive technologies, had sent a message. They were ready to join the galactic community. The message wasn't just an offer of peace, it was an invitation to witness humanity's greatest achievement, a warship built to rival the best in the galaxy. The message was received with laughter. The Galactic Council, made up of various alien species, found the notion of Earth having a warship so amusing that it became the topic of ridicule in every corner of the galaxy. The humans, a joke. Their technology, primitive. A fleet of powerful warships had already secured the Empire's place at the top. The humans, with their outdated ships, had no chance of being taken seriously. In the grand war rooms of the Empire, officers scoffed at the thought. What is Earth thinking? One alien commander sneered as he looked at the specs for the ship. This is laughable. A cargo ship could destroy this thing. Another officer, a seasoned general from the Gorthian species, smirked. Let's see how long their little ship lasts against a real fleet. His tone was dripping with disdain. The galaxy had seen many attempts by weaker civilizations to build weapons, and they had all failed. Earth, it seemed, was no different. Send the fleet. Let's see if they can actually put up a fight. The Empire's supreme commander, Lord Zathrax, ordered, laughing along with his officers. With that, a fleet of 10 of the Empire's most advanced warships, including the powerful dreadnought Tyrant's Wrath, was sent to Earth. They were to meet the human warship head-on, but not with the intent to destroy it right away. No, the Empire had a more fitting plan. They would allow the humans to make their move, then crush them swiftly, proving once and for all that Earth was nothing more than a speck in the galaxy's vast landscape. The humans had only one ship, the HSS Vengeance, a prototype built with everything humanity had learned. It wasn't as big as the Empire's warships, but it was fast, stealthy, and designed with the latest technology. It was Earth's final chance to show that they had more to offer than just their primitive past. From the bridge of the HSS Vengeance, Captain Marcus Thornton stood silently as the alien fleet approached. His crew was tense, every eye fixed on the galaxy's greatest threat. For years, humanity had been ignored, mocked, and scorned by the rest of the galaxy. But today they would show their strength, even if it meant fighting the most powerful fleet ever assembled. As the Empire's ships drew closer, the mocking words of the galactic commanders echoed in the captain's mind. This is going to be easy, they had said. They won't last 5 minutes. Captain Thornton's grip tightened on the command chair. Steady, he whispered to his crew. They were ready, though the Empire was not. They had underestimated Earth's resolve, and that was their biggest mistake. The first shots fired by the Empire were powerful, laser beams and missiles that traveled at the speed of light, aimed directly at the HSS Vengeance. In the blink of an eye, they would obliterate anything in their path. The bridge crew held their breath. But then, something happened that no one had anticipated. The HSS Vengeance, despite its seemingly weak appearance, shifted in an unexpected direction. Faster than any ship the Empire had ever seen. Its sleek, dark form darted out of the path of the incoming laser fire, evading each strike with uncanny precision. The alien fleet's first wave of attacks missed entirely, leaving them in stunned silence. The fleet's commanders had never seen anything like this. Was the human ship faster than they had calculated? Or was it something more? Lord Zathrax's eyes narrowed as he watched the display. What is this? How are they doing this? He muttered under his breath. The humans weren't supposed to have this kind of technology. They had no business matching the might of the Galactic Empire. Yet here they were, dancing around the Empire's attacks, moving with a grace and agility that was unheard of. The Gorthian general, who had so confidently dismissed the humans just moments earlier, now gripped his armrests tightly. "Increase firepower. Don't let it escape," he shouted. But no matter how hard the Empire's fleet tried, the human warship continued to dodge and weave. The HSS Vengeance moved like it had a mind of its own, each move calculated and precise. It was clear now that this was no ordinary ship, no mere prototype. Humanity had something far more dangerous in their hands. As the Empire's fleet tried to regroup and counter the unexpected movements, a new weapon was revealed. The HSS Vengeance opened fire with a weapon unlike anything the Empire had ever seen, a powerful energy blast that struck the nearest warship, the Tyrant's Wrath, dead center. For a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. The Tyrant's Wrath shuddered violently as the energy blast ripped through its hull. There was no escape. The warship's shields, designed to withstand the toughest of attacks, failed to protect it. In an instant, the flagship of the Empire exploded in a brilliant flash of light. What just happened? Lord Zathrax gasped. The rest of the fleet was left in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The Empire's flagship, a ship that had been considered invincible, had been destroyed by a single shot from Earth's prototype warship. The Empire had laughed at Earth's ship, mocked its design, and considered it nothing more than a joke. But now, as the first explosion rocked their fleet, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's so-called joke was far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. And so, the battle had begun. But it was clear. This was no longer a fight between the weak and the strong. It was the beginning of something that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated Earth, and they were about to pay the price. The flash of light from the explosion of Tyrant's Wrath still hung in the void of space like a fading star. The shockwave rippled outward, sending a shiver of disbelief through the remaining ships of the galactic fleet. It was a devastating blow, one that sent an unmistakable message to the Empire. Humanity was not to be underestimated. On the bridge of the HSS Vengeance, Captain Marcus Thornton stood motionless. The explosion had rocked his ship, but there was no time for celebration. His crew was already back at work, analyzing the aftermath of the Empire's first attack and calculating the next move. "We hit them hard, Captain," Lieutenant Miller said, his voice calm but edged with excitement. He was the ship's weapons officer, and it was his team that had fired the shot that had destroyed the Tyrant's Wrath. "We didn't just breach their shields. We overloaded them completely." Captain Thornton nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the tactical screen. The remaining Imperial fleet had scattered, momentarily disoriented by the destruction of their flagship. He could feel the weight of the moment settling over him. Humanity had just fired the first shot in a war they never asked for. But now that it was done, there was no turning back. "Hold steady, everyone," he said firmly. "We've made our point, but we're not done yet." The crew fell silent, understanding the gravity of their situation. They were the only human warship facing down an entire fleet of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. The odds were overwhelming, but now, for the first time, the Empire was forced to acknowledge Earth's strength. On the other side of the battlefield, the galactic commanders were reeling from the loss of their prized flagship. They had always believed that their fleet was invincible. The Tyrant's Wrath was the pinnacle of Imperial engineering, a symbol of their might, and it had been destroyed by a single shot. But this wasn't just about losing a ship. It was about losing face in front of the entire galaxy. Lord Zathrax, the supreme commander of the Empire, slanted his fist on the console in front of him. His face was a mixture of rage and disbelief. "How could this happen?" he muttered. "The humans should be nothing but ants to us. How could one ship cause this much damage?" The Imperial officers around him were equally stunned. They had all underestimated the humans. They had believed that Earth's technology was no match for the might of the Empire. But now, They were faced with the harsh truth. Earth had something far more dangerous than technology. It had willpower, ingenuity, and a thirst for survival. General Nax, the Gorthian officer who had once mocked the human ship as a joke, was the first to speak up. "We need to retaliate, Commander. We can't allow them to think they've won." His voice was tight, the edge of panic creeping in. "Send the full fleet at them. No more holding back. We crush them, here and now." Lord Zathrax turned toward him with a glare. "You don't understand," he said coldly. "This is not about crushing them anymore. It's about preserving our honor. If we don't make an example out of this, every other race in the galaxy will start to believe that Earth can stand up to the Empire." The Galactic Empire had always prided itself on its unmatched military superiority. The very idea of a single human ship threatening their fleet was an affront to their entire existence. They couldn't let this humiliation stand, not for the sake of their pride, and certainly not for the sake of their control over the galaxy. "We will send the entire fleet," Lord Zathrax decided after a long moment of silence. "But we will make sure this human ship knows its place. We will show the galaxy who truly rules these stars." Meanwhile, aboard the HSS Vengeance, the crew was preparing for the next phase of the battle. The destruction of the tyrant's wrath had given them a brief moment of respite, but they knew it wouldn't last long. The galactic fleet wasn't the kind to retreat after losing a single ship. They would regroup and come back stronger, angrier, and more determined to crush humanity's defiance. "They're coming back," Lieutenant Miller reported, his voice tense. "All ships are regrouping and heading straight for us. They mean business now." Captain Thornton's face tightened, but his voice was steady. "Then we'll show them what we're made of." The HSS Vengeance had been built for this moment. It wasn't just about its weaponry or speed. It was about its ability to survive against impossible odds. The ship's design was based on Earth's past failures and victories. It was built with everything humanity had learned over the years. And now, it was their only hope in this battle for survival. "Prepare the countermeasures," Thornton ordered. "We're not just going to survive this. We're going to make them regret ever underestimating us." The crew worked quickly, recalibrating weapons, fine-tuning engines, and activating the ship's most advanced systems. The battle was about to escalate. The Empire was coming for them with everything they had, and there would be no room for mistakes. As the Empire's fleet approached, the tension on the HSS Vengeance was palpable. Every crew member knew that the fight ahead would determine not just the fate of their ship, but the future of humanity. If they lost, Earth would become just another forgotten world in the Empire's vast, oppressive domain. But if they won, it would send a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not go down quietly. The battle was far from over. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had just witnessed the first spark of a conflict that would reshape the entire universe. The HSS Vengeance was humanity's symbol of defiance, and it would not go down without a fight. The void of space trembled with energy as the Galactic Empire's fleet closed in. Hundreds of warships, ranging from sleek destroyers to hulking dreadnoughts, moved in a coordinated formation, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. The destruction of the tyrant's wrath had been a humiliation, one the Empire would not allow to stand. This time, they were coming with full force. Aboard the HSS Vengeance, Captain Marcus Thornton stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display. The screen was filled with red enemy markers, forming a massive wall of firepower. There was no doubt about their intention. They weren't just attacking. They were coming to annihilate. "They've committed their entire battle group," Lieutenant Miller reported, his voice tense. "Over 200 warships, and they're advancing fast." The crew absorbed the information in silence. It wasn't just an overwhelming force. It was a declaration. The Empire wanted to wipe them from existence. Commander Elise Carter, the ship's tactical officer, exhaled sharply. "They're angry. That means they'll be aggressive. Reckless." Thornton nodded, his mind already calculating their options. One ship against 200 wasn't just a fight. It was suicide. But the HSS Vengeance wasn't just any ship. It was Earth's greatest warship, designed in secret, built in desperation, and forged in humanity's will to survive. "They think we're a fluke," Thornton muttered. "They think our first strike was luck. Let's show them just how wrong they are." The bridge came alive with action. Officers relayed orders, engineers primed the ship's systems, and weapons crews locked onto targets. The HSS Vengeance had one advantage: unpredictability. The Empire believed they knew human technology, but they had never seen this ship's full power. Outside, the enemy fleet spread out, preparing a coordinated assault. Fighters launched in swarms, moving like a tide of mechanical death. Their capital ships aligned, their cannons glowing with destructive energy. They weren't holding back. The Imperial fleet's flagship, the Dominator's Wrath, sent out a transmission. "Human vessel," a deep voice growled, filled with contempt. "Your existence is an insult to the Galactic Empire. Surrender now, and we will grant you a swift death. Resist, and we will burn your world to ashes." The bridge of the HSS Vengeance fell silent for a moment. Then Captain Thornton smiled, a cold, confident smile. "Let them come." The battle erupted in an instant. The first wave of Imperial fighters swarmed toward the HSS Vengeance, their plasma cannons blazing. But the human warship was ready. Automated turrets spun into action, unleashing a storm of laser fire. One by one, enemy fighters were torn apart, exploding in fiery bursts. The capital ships followed, launching a barrage of plasma torpedoes. The void of space lit up with glowing streaks of energy, all homing in on the lone human warship. The HSS Vengeance activated its defense grid, launching countermeasures and deploying advanced energy shields. Explosions flared across the battlefield, but the ship held firm. Then, humanity struck back. "Fire the main cannon," Thornton ordered. The ship's forward batteries roared to life, unleashing a massive, concentrated energy beam. It sliced through the darkness, tearing into an Imperial battlecruiser. The enemy ship's shields held for half a second before shattering like glass. The beam cut straight through its hull, splitting the warship in two. Flames erupted from the wreckage before it exploded into nothingness. The Galactic Fleet hesitated. They had expected an easy kill. They were wrong. The HSS Vengeance wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. The Imperial commander, Lord Zathrax, clenched his fists in rage. How is this possible? He turned to his officers, his eyes burning with fury. That ship should be debris. Increase firepower, overwhelm it. But Earth's warship had another surprise. The HSS Vengeance disappeared. One moment it was there, locked in combat, outnumbered 100 to 1. The next, it vanished in a shimmer of light. "What?" Zathrax roared. "Where did they go?" The Empire had never seen human stealth technology like this. Their ships were built for raw power, for overwhelming force. They relied on fear and dominance. But humans fought differently. The HSS Vengeance reappeared behind the Imperial fleet. Before they could react, its weapons opened fire. A full spread of torpedoes erupted from the ship's launch bays, streaking through space like vengeful comets. They slammed into the rear ranks of the Imperial fleet, detonating in a series of massive fireballs. Warships were crippled instantly, hulls buckled, and debris scattered. The Empire was in chaos. "This is impossible," General Nax shouted. "How is one ship doing this?" But the truth was clear. They had underestimated humanity. For too long, the Galactic Empire had believed they were superior. They had crushed weaker civilizations without effort. They had never faced an enemy who refused to bow. Now, the HSS Vengeance was proving that humanity wasn't just a stubborn race. They were survivors. They were warriors. And they were ready to burn the Empire's arrogance to the ground. The battle was far from over. But one thing was certain. The Empire's worst mistake wasn't underestimating Earth's technology. It was underestimating Earth's will to fight. The battle raged on across the void of space. But now, the Galactic Empire's fleet was no longer the confident force it had once been. The HSS Vengeance had shifted the balance of power in a way that was impossible to ignore. What had begun as a predictable slaughter of a single human vessel had transformed into a fierce and overwhelming struggle, with humanity's warship carving a bloody path through the Empire's pride. Captain Marcus Thornton stood at the helm, his eyes focused on the tactical readout. His fingers hovered over the controls, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Behind him, the crew worked furiously, each member carrying out their duty with precision and focus. The HSS Vengeance was built for this. Its systems were designed to work in perfect harmony, to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outfight even the most powerful of fleets. But Thornton knew that they couldn't keep this up forever. The Galactic Empire was vast, and despite their initial setbacks, it wouldn't take long for them to regroup and come back even stronger. Thornton, Lieutenant Miller's voice broke through the tension. The enemy's regrouping. They're pulling back into formation. Thornton turned his head, studying the screen. The remaining Imperial ships were consolidating, pulling into a tighter formation. They were making a stand, preparing for the final push. The fleet was trying to salvage what was left of its pride. "Don't give them time to think," Thornton said coldly. "We need to hit them hard before they can regroup. Open fire on their left flank. Hard and fast." The HSS Vengeance shifted its position in an instant, its engines roaring to life as it sped towards the Imperial fleet's weakened side. The enemy warships, though massive and powerful, were now feeling the pressure. The HSS Vengeance was no longer the target. It was the predator, and the Empire had become the prey. "Targets locked," Commander Elise Carter said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Firing main batteries." The ship's enormous plasma cannons roared to life, sending a cascade of energy beams towards the enemy fleet. The first wave of fire hit an Imperial destroyer, slicing through its shields in an instant and punching a hole straight through its hull. The ship's engines exploded, sending debris scattering into the cold expanse of space. "One down," Thornton muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. "Keep pushing." The HSS Vengeance didn't give the Empire a chance to retaliate. It moved with the precision of a predator, darting between the debris of destroyed ships, firing at the remaining Imperial vessels before they had a chance to even lock onto their target. The human warship was no longer just defending itself. It was hunting the Empire down. Suddenly, the flagship, the Dominator's Wrath, turned and fired a powerful burst of energy towards the HSS Vengeance. The shot came out of nowhere, and Thornton barely had time to react. But the Vengeance had already anticipated this. The ship executed a sharp evasive maneuver, and the beam missed by a hair's breadth, narrowly avoiding a collision that would have destroyed them in an instant. "That was too close," Miller muttered, his voice tight with adrenaline. Thornton's lips curled into a grin, his gaze never leaving the screen. "Keep them off balance. We need to make them doubt themselves." The Empire's pride was their greatest weakness. They believed they were unbeatable, that their strength was unparalleled, that no one could stand against their might. But they had never faced human ingenuity, never encountered the kind of resourcefulness that had driven humanity to survive time and time again. And now, they were seeing it firsthand. The HSS Vengeance continued its assault, tearing through the Imperial forces with cold precision. The Empire's ships were falling one by one, their once pristine fleets now reduced to smoldering wrecks floating helplessly in space. The Dominator's Wrath, which had once been the flagship of the Galactic Empire, was now battered and burning, its once mighty guns silenced. But the battle was far from over. Lord Zathrax, the Empire's greatest commander, watched in shock as his forces crumbled around him. His hands gripped the command chair tightly, his knuckles turning white with fury. His empire was being humiliated. He had not expected this. How could they have failed? How could they have underestimated Earth? "Lord Zathrax, we need to retreat," One of his officers called out urgently, "Our fleet is being destroyed. The human ship is unstoppable." But Zathrax refused to listen. He was the Empire's pride, and retreat was for the weak. He would never run from a human vessel. "No," Zathrax growled, his voice dripping with venom. "We will not retreat. We will make them pay for every ship they've destroyed." But even as he spoke, his forces were beginning to falter. The once unified fleet was now scattered and disorganized. In the midst of all the chaos, the HSS Vengeance continued its relentless pursuit, each strike more devastating than the last. The Galactic Empire, which had once controlled the stars, was now on the brink of collapse. The tide had turned. Thornton and his crew knew that the battle was nearly over, but they also knew this victory was only the beginning. The Empire would not take this defeat lightly. They would come again, stronger, more determined. But for now, the humans had proven their strength. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. As the last of the Empire's ships began to break apart, Thornton stood tall, staring out into the vastness of space. He had been tested. He and his crew had been pushed to their limits, but they had survived, and the Empire had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would never back down. The war was far from over, but one thing was clear: the Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated Earth, and they had paid the price. The silence that followed the destruction of the Imperial fleet was unnerving. Captain Marcus Thornton stood at the helm of the HSS Vengeance, his eyes glued to the tactical screens, scanning for any sign of retaliation from the Galactic Empire. The victorious atmosphere that filled the command deck was suddenly replaced by a heavy, tense calm. The enemy fleet was gone, reduced to floating debris and destroyed wreckage. But the reality was far from peaceful. The war had only just begun. "Sir," Lieutenant Miller's voice cut through the stillness, "the Dominator's wrath is still intact, though heavily damaged. They're trying to send out a distress signal. It won't be long before reinforcements arrive." Thornton nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Empire, despite the devastation, would not simply accept defeat. They would regroup. They would retaliate. It was their nature to never back down, especially when faced with humiliation like this. "They won't give up that easily," Thornton muttered, rubbing his hand across his brow. "Prepare for a counterattack. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." "Already in motion, sir," Miller replied, tapping at the console in front of him. "We've already begun rerouting our remaining energy to the shields, but we'll need time to fully recover. The Vengeance isn't indestructible." Thornton understood that better than anyone. They had won the battle, but at a cost. The HSS Vengeance was damaged, its systems strained after taking on so many enemy ships. It would take days, maybe weeks, to fully repair the warship, and that was time they simply didn't have. Suddenly, a flash of light from the edge of the battlefield caught Thornton's attention. It wasn't an explosion or a destroyed ship. No, this was something different. His gaze locked onto the sensor feed as he processed the new data. "Sir, you need to see this," Miller said, voice full of alarm. "Incoming ships, large and fast. They're from the Empire." Thornton's eyes narrowed. Reinforcements. The Empire had sent a new fleet, and from the looks of it, it was even larger than the one they had just destroyed. This wasn't just another wave of ships. It was a final, all-out push to reclaim their dignity and power. The Empire would throw everything it had left at humanity. This wasn't just a fleet. It was the last stand. "Get me a full tactical analysis. We need to know what we're up against." Miller's fingers flew across his console, and within moments, the tactical display flashed with new information. The Empire's reinforcements were massive, and among them was the flagship, the Titan's Wrath, an even more imposing vessel than the Dominator's Wrath. It was their last hope, the final weapon the Empire could rely on to crush humanity's rebellion once and for all. "They're coming fast, Captain," Miller reported, "and they're bringing everything. We can't outrun them." Thornton's mind raced. The situation was dire, but there was one thing the Empire didn't have: human ingenuity. The Vengeance may have taken damage, but it was still a powerful weapon. And more importantly, it was a symbol of humanity's defiance. He stood tall, the weight of the decision ahead of him pressing down on him like a ton of bricks. He had to act, and he had to act now. "Set a course for their flagship," he ordered, his voice cold and steady. "We're taking the fight to them." "Sir?" Miller looked at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. That ship." "I don't plan on fighting them head-on." "Miller," Thornton interrupted, "we'll use their arrogance against them. All we need is the element of surprise." The crew sprang into action, their movements sharp and quick as they adjusted the ship's course. The HSS Vengeance powered forward, its engines humming with renewed energy. Despite the damage, the ship was still one of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, and its stealth systems were designed to remain undetected by enemy sensors. Thornton's plan was risky. If they were discovered too early, they wouldn't survive the confrontation. But if they could get close enough, they might just have a chance. The Empire's new fleet would never expect the Vengeance to be anywhere near them. Meanwhile, aboard the Titan's Wrath, Lord Zathrax paced furiously back and forth in his command chamber. His fleet had suffered heavy losses, and his pride was shattered. Humanity had proven to be far more resilient and capable than he had ever imagined. And now, the last remnants of the Empire's power were about to descend upon the HSS Vengeance. Zathrax could feel the weight of his failure. The Empire had been humiliated, and this was his last chance to restore their supremacy. "We will destroy them," Zathrax said through gritted teeth. "This is not over." The Titan's Wrath and the rest of the fleet continued their relentless advance, unaware of the HSS Vengeance that was slowly closing in on them. Every second counted. Thornton knew they were running out of time. If they didn't act now, the Empire would overwhelm them. As they neared the Titan's Wrath, Thornton turned to his crew, his voice unwavering. "This is it, everyone. We've been underestimated. They've laughed at us. But now it's our turn to make them regret it. Get ready." The tension in the air was thick, as if everyone on board could feel the monumental moment approaching. This would be their last chance to strike a devastating blow against the Empire. If they could take down the Titan's Wrath, they would cripple the Empire's ability to launch another attack. But if they failed, humanity's struggle would come to a brutal end. Thornton's gaze hardened. "Fire when ready." The HSS Vengeance fired its main weapons, sending a concentrated barrage toward the Titan's Wrath. It was a strike unlike any before, powerful enough to pierce the flagship's shields. The battle had turned again. This time, humanity wasn't just defending. They were attacking. As the first round of fire connected, the Titan's Wrath was rocked, its shields flickering in a desperate attempt to absorb the impact. The shockwaves from the blast rattled through the Empire's fleet, and for the first time, the Empire's forces began to panic. Zathrax, now desperate, screamed into the communication device. "Counterattack. Every ship, fire on the human vessel. Do not let them destroy us." But it was too late. The battle had already begun to shift in humanity's favor. The Empire was no longer in control, and the HSS Vengeance was determined to finish what it had started. The Empire's last stand was crumbling, and the shockwave of their failure was felt throughout the galaxy. Humanity had finally shown its true strength, and there was no turning back. The Galactic Empire's fate was sealed, and its once proud fleet was now at the mercy of Earth's greatest weapon. The battlefield around the HSS Vengeance was chaos, an explosion of energy and debris that left no room for hesitation. The Titan's Wrath, once a symbol of the Empire's unmatched power, was now in a vulnerable position, its shields flickering dangerously, unable to withstand the relentless barrage from the HSS Vengeance. Thornton's heart raced as the crew of the human warship pushed forward with unyielding resolve, determined to finish what they had started. But there was no time to celebrate. "We've punched through their shields, Captain," Miller's voice rang out through the command deck. "We're moving in for another strike." Thornton's grip tightened on the armrest of his command chair. It was now or never. This was their chance to take down the Titan's wrath, and with it, the Empire's hopes of dominating the galaxy. But the battle was far from over. As the HSS Vengeance closed in, more ships from the Empire's fleet attempted to intercept, unleashing a hailstorm of fire in an attempt to protect their flagship. "Brace for impact," Thornton barked, his voice sharp with urgency. The ship rocked violently as enemy fire struck the Vengeance's shields. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to stabilize the vessel. The once proud human warship was taking damage, but it wasn't enough to stop them. The Vengeance had taken far worse in the past and kept going. This time would be no different. "Target the Titan's Wrath's engines," Thornton ordered. "We take out their ability to move, and it's game over for them." The crew worked in unison, their fingers flying across the controls. The HSS Vengeance fired again, a direct shot to the engines of the Titan's Wrath. The blast struck true, and a massive explosion erupted from the Empire flagship. It wasn't a total kill, but it was enough to cripple the ship. The Titan's Wrath shuddered and slowed, unable to escape the devastating barrage that humanity had unleashed upon it. However, the Empire wasn't finished. The Dominator's Fury, a formidable warship with advanced weaponry, surged forward, taking the position that the Titan's Wrath had once occupied. The enemy had more ships, more weapons, but they were losing control. The sudden surge of reinforcements had been their last hope, and now that was faltering. "Sir, the Dominator's Fury is charging up its primary weapon," Miller shouted, his voice laced with fear. Thornton's heart skipped a beat. The Dominator's Fury was notorious for its destructive power. A single shot from its main cannon could obliterate an entire fleet. If they didn't act quickly, the HSS Vengeance would be wiped off the map in a matter of seconds. "Divert all power to forward shields," Thornton ordered, his voice calm but with a tinge of urgency. "Prepare to counterstrike. We can't let them fire that weapon." The crew scrambled, working at breakneck speed to reroute power. The HSS Vengeance shuddered again as enemy fire rained down upon them, but the shields held. Thornton's eyes remained locked on the tactical display, watching the Dominator's Fury prepare to unleash its devastating cannon. It was now a race against time. The HSS Vengeance was readying its own weapons, targeting the weak points in the Dominator's Fury's hull. But the gap was narrowing. One hit from the enemy ship's primary weapon, and all would be lost. Then, just as the Dominator's Fury fired its deadly energy beam, the HSS Vengeance launched a final, concentrated volley of missiles. They hit the target just in time, disrupting the Dominator's Fury's weapon systems. The beam missed by mere inches, grazing the HSS Vengeance's shields, but causing no catastrophic damage. The Dominator's Fury fired wildly, its shot missing its mark, as the Vengeance expertly evaded, using its speed and maneuverability to get into a more advantageous position. "Now," Thornton shouted, his eyes gleaming with determination. The HSS Vengeance fired once more, its main cannons firing at maximum power. The shots tore through the remaining defenses of the Dominator's Fury, slamming into the hull and sending shockwaves through the massive ship. It was clear now. The Empire was losing. The human warship was too fast, too precise, and too powerful. "Sir, the Dominator's Fury is going critical," Millard yelled. "It's about to explode." Thornton barely had time to give a response before the Dominator's Fury erupted in a brilliant explosion. The blast lit up the void of space, its shockwave rippling through the battlefield, scattering debris in every direction. For a moment, everything was silent, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. But Thornton didn't need to look at the explosion to know the battle had turned in humanity's favor. The Empire was faltering, their reinforcements shattered, their flagship crippled. The HSS Vengeance had done what it was designed to do. It had struck at the heart of the Empire, and it had succeeded. "Captain, we've done it," Miller said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "The Empire's fleet is retreating. They're in full retreat." Thornton didn't allow himself to feel relief. Not yet. There was still the matter of the Empire's leadership. The Empire's fleet might be in retreat, but the war wasn't over. They had to make sure that the Empire couldn't regroup. They couldn't allow the devastation they had caused to go unpunished. "Set a course for the Imperial capital," Thornton ordered. "We're not done yet. We're going to make sure they never threaten humanity again." The crew began to follow his orders, already anticipating what was next. The Empire had underestimated them once again, and now it would pay the price. Humanity's victory had just begun. The Empire might have been the strongest force in the galaxy, but they had been blindsided by Earth's relentless ingenuity and will to survive. Thornton and the crew of the HSS Vengeance weren't done yet. They would continue the fight, pushing forward until the Empire was no more. The final assault had been a success, but it was only the beginning of a new era. An era where humanity would rise as the true power in the galaxy. The Empire had been brought to its knees, and the universe would never forget the day humanity showed its strength. The battlefield was silent now. Wreckage from the Empire's fleet drifted in the cold void of space, the twisted remains of once mighty warships now reduced to lifeless debris. The HSS Vengeance stood victorious, its hull battered but still intact, its weapons systems still primed for battle. The human warship had not only survived, it had won. On the bridge, Captain Thornton sat in his command chair, his gaze fixed on the distant glow of the Empire's imperial capital, now within striking distance. They had done the impossible, defeated the Empire's strongest fleet, forced their enemies into retreat, and proven, once and for all, that humanity was not to be mocked. "Sir," Commander Miller spoke, his voice a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "The remaining Empire ships are retreating into hyperspace. They're falling back to defend their homeworld." Thornton nodded, already expecting this. "They know we're coming." The bridge was filled with an eerie silence. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The HSS Vengeance had struck at the Empire's pride, but the war wasn't over yet. The enemy still had fleets, still had resources, but now, for the first time, they knew fear. "Status on our fleet?" Thornton asked. "We took damage, but we're still operational," Miller replied. "We've lost some of our escort ships, but most of the fleet remains combat-ready." Thornton exhaled slowly. "Then we finish this." He turned toward the massive view screen at the front of the bridge, where the Imperial capital loomed in the distance. It was a planet covered in towering spires, its atmosphere glowing with the golden lights of its sprawling cities. This was the heart of the Empire, the place where their leaders had laughed at humanity, mocked Earth's technological advancements, and sent their fleets to crush them. But now it was Earth's turn. "Transmit a message to the Imperial Palace," Thornton ordered. "Let's see if their leaders still think we're weak." The communications officer nodded and began sending the transmission. A few moments later, the screen flickered to life, revealing the face of High Lord Varric, the supreme commander of the Empire's military forces. His once confident expression was now tense, his golden robes slightly disheveled. He had seen what had happened to his fleet. He knew what was coming. "This is Captain Thornton of the HSS Vengeance," Thornton began, his voice cold and steady. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are broken. You have one chance: surrender or face complete annihilation." For a moment, Varric said nothing. Then he let out a bitter chuckle. "You think this is over, human? Do you really believe one victory means you can stand against the might of the Empire?" Thornton didn't flinch. "I don't think, Varric. I know." He gestured to the weapons officer. "Show them what happens when humanity is underestimated." A moment later, a barrage of missiles streaked toward one of the Empire's orbital defense platforms, a massive station bristling with weapons. It was one of the strongest defensive structures in the Empire, capable of repelling entire invasions. But against the HSS Vengeance, it stood no chance. The missiles struck in rapid succession, explosions ripping through the station's hull. Fire and debris scattered into the void as the once mighty fortress crumbled in seconds. The imperial capital, watching from below, had just witnessed the destruction of one of their most powerful defenses, and it had taken mere moments. Varric's expression darkened. "You'll regret this." Thornton leaned forward. "No, the Empire will." There was a long silence. Then Varric exhaled sharply. "What are your terms?" A smirk tugged at the corner of Thornton's lips. "Unconditional surrender. The Empire dissolves. Humanity takes control of its former territories. Your leaders will be tried for war crimes, and Earth will no longer be treated as an inferior species." Varric's fists clenched, his pride warring with reality. He wanted to resist, but he knew he had no options left. "You have 10 minutes to decide," Thornton added. "Otherwise, the Imperial capital will suffer the same fate as your fleet." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence once more. The crew waited. The entire fleet waited. The galaxy waited. Minutes passed, each second stretching into eternity. Then, a single transmission came through, an official surrender from the Empire. The bridge erupted in cheers. Some of the crew slumped in their seats, exhaustion finally catching up to them. Others embraced, unable to believe what they had just accomplished. Thornton allowed himself a small smile. It was over. The Empire had laughed at Earth. They had mocked humanity's advancements, dismissed them as weak and unworthy. And now, they were no more. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same again.